6:02 p.m. on Monday, January 6th. I'm going to first call to order the Liquor Control Board meeting. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance led by Deputy Mayor Thomas Renner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of
the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we have two items on the consent agenda here for liquor control. An approval for Donworry Korean LLC for restaurant application and first-class liquor license. These are both new and conditional. And then approval for Lara Trading, doing business as Zero Market, second-class liquor license, tobacco license, and substitute, all renewal conditional. Is Jenny in the room?
Yes. Hi, good evening.
Hi, Jenny.
Staff has no concerns over these, just waiting for inspections.
Excellent. I don't think, unless they're in the room, I don't see anyone online for either of these.
No.
Okay. Any questions from council? Okay. Hearing no concerns, would someone like to make a motion to approve both items on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Thomas, second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. That is the end of our Liquor Control Board meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Aurora, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That meeting is adjourned. Thank you. So it is 6:04 p.m. I will call to order the Winooski City Council meeting. Agenda review is up first. Any concerns about the order of tonight's agenda? Okay. We'll move on to public comment. We do have public comment time on every item on the agenda, but if you would like to make a comment about a question or topic that's not included on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to do so. Do we have anyone in person in council chambers that wishes to make a public comment?
Looks like no.
Okay. And if you are on Zoom and wish to make a comment, you can use the raise hand feature. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have our Council and Cannabis Control Commission minutes from December 16th, payroll warrant for December 8 to 21, accounts payable warrants December 18 and January 2nd, subsequent to payout warrants for July, August, September, and October, a Safe, Healthy, Connected People Commission member appointment, and a Winooski Memorial Library Committee youth member reappointment. Any concerns about any of the consent agenda items? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Thomas, second by Bryn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to council reports. Aurora, would you like to kick us off?
Certainly. So the INB Inclusion and Belonging Commission met on December 19th. Due to it being close to the holidays and a few of our members being sick, our chair wasn't able to attend, so most of the agenda items were moved to our February meeting. Those agenda items include rethinking the timing and regularity of the IMB Commission meetings, talking about looking at the remaining funds for the stipends that the Inclusion and Belonging Commission is piloting, as well as an update on the Working Community Challenge grant, because we have at least one member that is doing overlapping work on these two equity goals. So those are now going to be on our February meeting, which is going to be on the third Thursday, which is February 20th. That's all I have.
Thank you. Bryn, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. The Chinook Solid Waste District met on December 18th. The board authorized the executive director to pursue new property purchase negotiations for the material recovery facility. The initial parcel that they had planned to develop on had some updated wetlands delineated, so they've been undergoing a search to find other parcels in the kind of Chittenden County core, pretty close to the existing offices that could be suited for the new MRF. So still, things are still underway there. Nothing is signed yet and probably won't be for a couple months now, but it's promising to see negotiations start for a parcel not too far from the original one they were hoping for in Williston. The Infrastructure Commission met on the 19th. Primarily had a presentation by our Inclusion and Belonging representative, Leo Beebe. As part of his Winooski School District capstone project, he actually worked with former Deputy Mayor Jim Duncan on providing draft updates for the tree ordinance and commission, and he did an excellent job presenting those to the Municipal Infrastructure Commission last month. There was an initial vote on whether or not the commission would like to move those to the next stage of a review, and they all voted unanimously that they agree that the updates should move to the next stage. So I'll be connecting with you and others on staff to see how to move that along, how to move that forward, and the timeline for that. But really exciting to see that he was able to incorporate his schoolwork into updating some draft policy for us. So very, very cool to see that happening. The Municipal Infrastructure Commission will not be meeting in January. We do not anticipate the next traffic calming study to be ready by the time we would meet on the 16th. And with the recent bridge open house and with weekly budget meetings for council, they just opted to move to cancel this month and wait until February for our next meeting. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Finance Commission met last month. They reviewed the community budget survey and activity results, the same stuff that we saw at council as well. There wasn't a quorum, unfortunately, but there was some discussion, and I guess kind of a takeaway there was that they found the results affirming of the city's current priorities and trajectory, and agreed that we should be prioritizing infrastructure, public safety, community services, and affordability of tax rates. So the things that came up in the survey. Finance Commission also will not be meeting in the month of January, so the next meeting won't be until February. I think we meet on the second Tuesday. The Planning Commission met to reflect on conversation from the Developer Roundtable meeting, as well as data that had previously been shared with the Housing Commission on the costs to build parking. They also revisited the proposed replacement ordinance amendments. And in light of all the information received, they're asking staff to pull together some more data before moving forward on the replacement or inclusionary zoning. Planning and Housing will be having a joint meeting. This isn't confirmed, but I believe it's going to be January 22nd. That's a Wednesday at 6 p.m. And then Planning Commission's regular meeting is January 23rd, Thursday at 6:30 p.m. I also attended, since our last meeting, the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance monthly meeting. Was invited to share Winooski's legislative priorities as they were having a discussion about legislative priorities there, and heard alignment with what the Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont plans to advocate for in the State House with some of our goals or our priorities, and also what Burlington has put forward. I also hosted the Housing Roundtable group and solicited some insights on our priorities for the Armory property and approach to a future RFP. I'll share those out at a future time, what the results of that discussion were. And Lastly, I was able to join the Winooski High School Culture and Community class to share a little bit about Winooski local government and hear some ideas from those students on how to better engage youth in Winooski and leverage school-based relationships to engage our broader community. I'll also share more details on that in the future. That's it for me. Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. Downtown Winooski took a little break for the holidays, so did not meet, but safe, healthy, connected people met last month, and it's a really productive meeting. We had gone for a little bit without a chair due to not having quorum and members coming in and out, so we were able to, the commission nominated and appointed a chair, so that was exciting. Also a new secretary, and there was just some really great and robust conversation about what the commission is looking to do. You know, it's mostly a lot of new members. Previously, there have been some folks who've been there for a really long time and did some great work, but the new members are excited to kind of either revitalize some old things that the commission used to be a part of, and really looking into new things that the commission can do and ways that they can help council and help residents. So it was an exciting conversation. The fire chief was there and spoke about things that we've spoken about here consistently, the difficulties, not just in Winooski, but nationwide in recruitment and retention. I think the commission really appreciated hearing that from him. And then also related to that commission, Ray and the fire chief and I interviewed somebody that we will be talking about later today in the agenda. So that's exciting that the commission continues to have some interest of folks joining. So just really exciting over there. Next meeting for Safe, Healthy, Connected People will be next Tuesday, and Downtown Winooski will be meeting next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thanks. Charlie?
Hey, thanks. About half my update has already been covered, but I'm just gonna run through it anyway. Happy New Year, everyone. First and foremost, I'm excited to announce my intent to run for re-election to my current seat on City Council. It's taken me a great amount of thought, consideration, and introspection to come to this decision, and it would be an honor to continue to serve our fair city in this role. Next, I'd like to let everyone know that the Winooski Housing Commission and Winooski Planning Commission have a joint meeting that's tentatively set for Wednesday, the 22nd at 6 p.m. There's a hybrid option available via the city website. Jasmine is also here with us today to discuss the commission's progress on strategic vision goals. We did not meet last month, so there's nothing to update from that stance, and that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, everyone. On to city updates. Elaine.
Yes, tonight continues the fiscal year 2026 staff budget presentations. Folks that are here or virtually or otherwise, please stick around for the Community Services Department presentation to learn more about community programs and events, parks, the library, the pool, the senior center, community gardens, and if you can believe it, more than that. For the full schedule of budget meetings and information, you can visit winooskivt.gov/FY26. That's F as in fiscal. Are you interested in running for local office during the town meeting day election on March 4th, 2025? Residents can run for Winooski City Council. There are two-year terms available. And for the Winooski School District Board. Openings are available for 2- and 3-year trustee terms and a 3-year treasurer term. To run, you must file a consent of candidate form and petition with at least 30 signatures, more are encouraged, by 5 p.m. on Monday, January 27th, 2025. Please visit the news updates section of our website at winooskivt.gov to learn more, or you can stop by the city clerk's office Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can also call or email. Those contacts are 802-655-6410 or clerk@winooskivt.gov. And finally, Green Mountain Power has scheduled a power outage to upgrade a transformer in Winooski on Thursday, January 25th. Paul, is that this Thursday?
Many apologies. It should be January 9th.
Thank you. And the outage will occur between 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., which will affect buildings on East Allen Street, East Street, and Abenaki Way, and the traffic signal at East Allen and the East Street intersection. Customers affected by this outage will be contacted directly by Green Mountain Power ahead of time. For up-to-date outage information, visit greenmountainpower.com/outages. If you have questions, please contact Green Mountain Power at 888-835-4672. And thank you for your patience while Green Mountain Power works on this project. That's all for me.
All right, thanks, Elaine. We are on to our regular items. So first step A for discussion or approval is the voter-backed petition, pledge regarding Palestinians in Israel. Jenny?
Yes, good evening again. So I received this petition, and it met the number of signatures that was needed, the 5%, so 301 signatures. And I've just put together on the cover sheet what is your role and what you decide to do. This was a voter-backed petition by one of our local residents that organized this, and it was submitted correctly.
All right, thank you, Jenny. So much like the last voter-backed petition we had, this is non-binding, so we have a decision to make about whether or not to place this on the town meeting day ballot. I will share that I had a chance to meet with the folks who were organizing this several weeks ago, and at first read, I didn't see any concerns with the language of this ballot item. I will say, having looked at it again over the weekend, I hadn't realized, my first read I thought was like voters taking this pledge or making these affirmations, but after reading it again this weekend, I see that it is voters advising us as a body to make this pledge. And I have some concerns with the last sentence. So we pledge to join others in working to end all support to Israel's apartheid regime, settler colonialism, and military occupation. I don't know what that means for us. I don't see this showing up in our work, right, at the local level. And so I'm thinking back to our previous voter-backed petition discussion, where in my mind is this something we want to put on the ballot if we're not prepared to take action if voters move it forward? Because I do not know what that action would be in this instance. So that's something I'm thinking about. I wanted to share that and then open it to hear what others are thinking about this ballot item, potential ballot item.
Yeah, I guess I also have a little bit of a pause because I didn't fully advising the mayor and council. But this feels more in line with kind of our Winooski's long history of putting these types of non-binding resolutions about wider issues that affect our community and either our other wider local community or national and international communities. Example with the various F-35/VTANG mission binding resolutions, Citizens United non-binding resolutions. So to me, this does feel in line with past practice to move this forward. I was also thinking about it in using some of the questions that we put forward and in the equity assessment worksheet, specifically the one that's kind of starts it off, what does the proposal seek to accomplish? And is the purpose of the proposal to uplift the communities most adversely impacted? And felt that it very much is kind of in line with a lot of the equity work and just general welcoming community work that we've done a lot towards. So kind of holding both those things of there is some historical precedent from past councils And just in general, with accepting these types of non-binding resolutions, and also feeling that it aligns with some of the equity work and goals we put forward.
Thanks, Aurora.
I'll go. For me, I think that putting this forth to the voters provides an opportunity to, at a local level, whichever way they vote on it, it shows where they stand on this very important issue. And it's a population that can be taken and added or subtracted from the national population that feels one way or another on the topic as well. I think there's a lot of value in local municipalities taking up issues like this, even if it is perceived as only being performative. The performance of solidarity is in and of itself minor, at the very least, solidarity. Yeah, I think that's my input at the moment.
Thanks, Charlie.
I think that I am happy to put this to voters to give them the option to decide on this. I think I agree with the mayor and that, you know, we pledge to join others in working to end, et cetera, as our body is itself and what it is formed and what we do. I don't know what we can pledge in terms of work to end any of those things that are listed. But I'm not opposed to letting voters decide if they want that to be a statement that they want declared.
Thanks, Thomas.
I'd say that I watched the Burlington City Council meeting where they recently reviewed this. And Burlington did not, they were split and then did not move forward. I believe the chair of the council put out the president of the council put out a press release as well, stating his position around not wanting to move it forward. So I know that there are similar efforts in our neighboring municipalities. I want to say thanks to Jenny for including a link to the Secretary of State's website to give a little bit more background around binding versus non-binding petitions. I found that to be really helpful to have and reflect on leading into tonight's meeting, so thanks for doing that. I don't see how this is the same as the F-35s, which are directly impacting our community, and Citizens United, which also policy-wise has direct impact on our community. So just out of policy stance, I don't see that as the same in being perhaps non-binding in nature. I perhaps see that it's correlated, but I believe the impact for F-35s and Citizens United is much more direct to our immediate community. I agree with the mayor and the deputy mayor that the final clause on how the city would work towards this is unclear. But I think that given that it's a non-binding petition, that I would not want to stand in the way of this going to the voters and allowing them to have their voices heard. So while it's interesting to see what our neighboring municipalities have done, and correlation with previous non-binding petitions, I don't see that influencing my decision here personally. I think I'm comfortable moving this to the ballot.
Great, thank you all. Do we have any public comment on this item? I would start, if there's anyone in the room who wishes to make a comment.
Doesn't look like it.
Is there anyone on Zoom who wants to make comment on this item? You can use the chat or raise hand feature. Okay. Seeing no comment, it sounds like someone might want to make a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Charlie, second by Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item approved. We will see it on town meeting day. Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny.
Okay. We are on to item B, the fiscal year 2026 staff budget presentation from Community Services. Ray, welcome.
Thank you. Just give me a second to get set up here. I didn't bring snacks, but everything just short of it.
Well, we're not there to enjoy them, so
Yeah.
I'm sort of glad, Ray.
Would you rather run it yourself?
Yeah, I'm gonna run it through here. All right. All right. All right, can you still see the screen? Perfect.
we
And
see
I
your
can see my
presentation.
notes, which is helpful. Excellent. Well, thanks for being here, everybody, and look forward to this every year. It's really a pretty fun opportunity. I know it's stressful in a lot of ways too, but really fun opportunity to reflect on the year past, look at what we're looking to do in the future, and really think deeply about the department as a whole, and to get some really meaningful policy feedback from you all. So it's really something I do genuinely look forward to. So jumping right in, quick agenda. I'm going to do a very brief overview. I think you've probably all seen this once or twice now, at least, of the department, talk about the staffing positions, a couple of quick highlights of various projects and accomplishments from fiscal year 24 and the beginning of fiscal year 25. We'll get into the fiscal year 26 proposal for the general fund, talk about a few priority projects that are within there, and then the very scintillating $3,000 community garden budget will wrap us up at the end. So hopefully that agenda will work, and if so, we'll forge on. So as mentioned here, quick overview of our fabulous team, many of whom are here in the room or on Zoom. I noticed, I can't say enough how lucky I am to come to work with these people every day, and how lucky this community is to have these folks working on your behalf. It is a top-notch group of human beings doing fabulous work, so I'll leave it at that. So within the department, as folks have typically seen, 4 kind of buckets, as I like to call them, within the department. So Thrive, which is our licensed childcare program. I should have mentioned there that Thrive program director position is a current vacancy, so I've been filling in there along with members of the Thrive team since the beginning of the school year. So we are actively trying to hire for that position now. And then around 8 staff members there. That ebbs and flows a bit between the after-school program and the summer. We obviously serve a lot more kiddos in the summertime, so tend to grow a little bit more and have a few fewer folks during the after-school hours. Recreation and Parks. So we have our Rec and Parks manager who oversees a full-time rec assistant, a very part-time rec assistant, which is kind of rose from the ashes of the AmeriCorps program. So the small amount of money that we had committed there has been paying for a little bit less than 10 hours a week of a second rec assistant. And then our pool staff, which, as folks know, is pretty large for the summer. So roughly 5 supervisors, approximately 20 lifeguards, and then a swim team director and roughly 8 coaches. I say roughly and approximately because every summer it depends a little bit. These are all part-time positions and seasonal positions. So some years we'll have, all of our lifeguards looking to work 30 to 40 hours a week. Other summers we've got folks that are looking to do, 15. So the number of humans changes, but the number of hours remains steady over those years. Library, again, a number of folks here, but Nate has done a great job there leading that team. We have a full-time youth services coordinator, 2 library clerks, which are part-time, and then several substitutes that help us out when folks are out. So I'm really pleased to say that we are very recently back up to full staff. We'd had a long-term outage, and also we're dealing with our temporary relocation because of the air quality. So these guys have been through the grinder a little bit and have just held it together masterfully, and very happy to have everybody back on board. So thank you for fortitude, their library team. And then last but not least, Barb is here, but our senior programs manager who helps run the Winooski Senior Center and programs for our seniors. That is also a part-time position currently at 28 hours. And then up top, you'll see there's two folks here that kind of serve across the department. So our admin and outreach coordinator, Zara, really provides administrative support for the full department. So that's everything from entering attendance data, following up with families who are doing subsidy applications, helping cover shifts in the library. She's really everywhere and kind of is, in a lot of ways, the glue that holds us all together. And then, again, we'll talk about this position down the road in this presentation a bit more, but the youth interventionist position, part-time, 28-hour role, current vacancy there, and we'll have more to say about sort of what that position provides and some sort of initial plans about how we might move forward given that vacancy. So any questions on the staffing side? And sorry, you're all very tiny boxes up at the top, so like wave your hands frantically if you have a question. Okay.
Brandon, go ahead.
All right, good.
Quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
About the youth interventionist, are you going to get into this a little bit later?
Yes, yeah. So there's a slide down the road in this presentation where we'll talk a little bit more about that position and some thinking there about how we want to approach that vacancy.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I'm realizing too, sorry for anybody watching this, I'm like staring down at my computer because that's where all the faces I'm presenting to are, so apologies for that. All right. So a couple quick highlights from the department. I think a lot of these played out as I expected. When you start to crunch the numbers, it's always nice when they affirm what you expect. Overall, the number of programs was down a little bit, and I think that's a result of the transition away from ESSER funding. I think we saw a huge amount of growth under that funding. Obviously, we're really fortunate that council carried forward a good chunk of that funding. But we were anticipating a little bit of program contraction given that the amount ESSER was providing was more than what was carried forward in the general fund. So it's a roughly 10% drop in programming, but really interestingly, our participation was up. So in spite of number of programs being down, the number of people we served was higher. So I think that was a really cool thing to see. I was sort of anticipating that number would be a little more flat than growing. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise. But again, the number of programs coming down was not a surprise to me. That's something we were anticipating given the shifts that we had to make. And then I think here too, I just want to mention, this slide really captures kind of rec as a whole or community service as a whole, but I think important to just reflect on, this is a really critical front door for folks to enter into community engagement, local government, and building community. And so I think as we think about our equity audit and the results there, some of the pieces that came up, I think it's important to just reflect on the ways that, a youth soccer program is great. You get kids moving around, they're kicking a ball, they're staying out of trouble, that's awesome. But seeing some of those friendships and connections build and the ways that ripples out over the community is pretty neat. Our part-time rec assistant, Quigley, has served as a pool staff the last number of summers and was recently talking to them about how cool it is for them to see kids that they taught how to swim now learning how to rock climb or showing up at the library or being out in the parks. And so I think it's neat to see the number of places that we're touching families and serving them throughout the community. So I wanted to mention that here.
Can I interrupt you, Ray?
Yeah, please.
I just want to point out that obviously the contraction of programming isn't accidental, it's a thoughtful process. So the fact that there was increased participation is a testament that the team selected the right programs to continue. So strategic contraction.
Yep, thank you for that. And then last here on this bottom, good to see this number has been pretty steady the last few years, but roughly 91% of our registration-based program slots were filled across the year. So that's a really good sign too that we're putting programs out that people are responding well to. So that was a really good number to see staying steady. Gonna let me go forward. There we go. So we'll take a deep dive here, pun squarely intended, on the Myers Pool. This is obviously a big service area for us and one that I tend to get a lot of questions about. I know you all do as well. especially on the budgetary front. So, we're 4 years in. I think it's been really great to see the growth and the consistency here in usage. So this past summer rebounded from a pretty miserable weather summer in 2023 and saw our visits back up to about where we expect them to be. We saw swim lesson enrollments up. Camp groups had rebounded, which was great. And kudos to Robin for doing some good work, recruiting some camps to come and participate. And then swim team has stayed steady. And then this number at the bottom, I always really like to highlight because I think from an aquatic safety perspective, it's a huge deal. 1,020 different youth passed this deep water swim test this past summer. That's a huge deal in terms of keeping kids safe when they're in the water. So I can't say enough about this facility, the service it's provided there, the staff, how hard they work. So really a great resource. Also quickly want to give a shout out to the swim team. They hosted first time in the new facility, the state Champlain Valley Swim League Championships. We had a little over 2,000 people through over the course of a weekend. And we held the line. The facility performed beautifully. Staff was great and got a lot of positive feedback from the swim community around the state. Also really cool, but at that event, our head swim coach, Jackson Callanan, was awarded the 2024 Alan B. Cummings Award for Outstanding Service to Youth Swimming. So really pretty special summer for us at the pool. Yeah, Bryn.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks for compiling these numbers. Really helpful to see how we're progressing year over year. Since opening, since kind of emerging from the pandemic, the rain and smoke from wildfires 2 summers ago, and transition from having our own lifeguards under our own supervision versus contracting with a separate entity. So I think all of this really is helpful in building lessons learned and continuous improvement there.
Yep.
And I am curious also if you have any year-over-year comparison over season passes that have been sold and resident, non-resident.
Yep.
I know you have swim lessons there and resident, non-resident for numbers there, but if that was something else that you might offer us some insights.
Yep. And I added a slide here. So for folks following along at home, this is going to look a little different than what was in the packet, but added a slide here. Again, doing a little bit further analysis of the pool. And Bryn, hopefully this will get at some of the pieces here. But I looked at over the 2024 season, what was an average day like in terms of season pass sales, day pass sales, revenues, and then sort of the budgetary impact of a day of service there. So what I will say overall is that our season pass sales were slightly up, which was good. And I think not wildly so. I think we're reaching a natural plateau given the size of our community and also the capacity of the facility. We are limited in the number of bathers we can have on the deck based on lifeguard ratios. And so I think we are seeing kind of pretty quickly that we've hit a plateau in terms of what our sales and our attendance is going to look like. So I think, again, to go back to that previous slide, but that like 17 to 18,000 number, I think is a number you're going to see consistently over the next few years, I would imagine, unless we make some dramatic changes to the way that we're providing service at the pool, because open swim is sort of limited by the number of people we can have on the deck at any given time. Perhaps not surprisingly, majority of our day pass sales was to non-residents, so about 70%. And then about 40% of our season pass sales were to non-residents, which was interesting. That was a little higher than I was anticipating. Nice thing there is that we did increase those rates last year and still saw a pretty high percentage of our season pass sales to non-residents. So I think that's, from a revenue perspective, really positive for the community. And then these numbers here, one thing I will say in kind of crunching these numbers is I did pull out the swim team. That's really sort of a standalone program. Their staff are lifeguard certified, so they're providing their own guarding within the coaching budget. So this number here is really just looking at open swim, camp groups, and swim lessons. Those are kind of our primary services. And when I say open swim, that's also inclusive of lap swim, senior aqua aerobics, senior swim, and then low stimulus swim. Those are all pieces that are captured within a season pass. So when I say open swim, that's kind of what I'm meaning. And I think this was interesting to see, the net impact on a average day operationally for us ended up being about $1,600 of cost, net cost. When you factor in the operational cost, so that 988 number that's there is your chemicals, your water, all the sort of physical plant costs, as well as a public works staff that's partially baked into this budget to help run the facility. And then the aquatic staff is our lifeguard team. And so, again, those lifeguard staffing levels are dictated really by Red Cross ratios, and based on the number of people we're anticipating in the pool, that's the number of guards that we're staffing with. We're certainly doing things where we can to, if it's a cool day, we're going to send some people home. We're trying to be flexible in real time as it relates to managing those staff numbers. But, again, we sort of have to prepare for the worst case scenario is not the way to say it, but I guess best case scenario, right? That the place is full, we've got maximum capacity, and then we've got lifeguards prepared to support that. And then, I mentioned last summer being pretty dreadful. I was pleased to see this year there were actually 93 potential days, but I took the 3 days out of this number that we held this pool closed for leagues, because that's something that as a swim team we're required to do every 4 years. So minus those, we had 90 potential days of service and closed for 7 of those days because of weather. So I think being in Vermont, not too bad. So I'll pause here and take any questions folks have.
I do have a follow-up question. So looking ahead, well, first, again, thank you for compiling the data. I think it's really helpful, really valuable to have this all compiled. I'm psyched to see less than 10% of the days for potentially being open were needed to be closed for inclement weather. So it's just really helpful to see how all the numbers are shaking out, how we're maximizing things that are within our control and how we're adapting to things that are kind of outside of our control. So I know this does take effort to put together, but I think it's extremely helpful to have this. So thank you again.
Yeah, of course.
I wanted to know, looking ahead, if the chair was replaced, if that will be ready for this next season.
Oh, the handicap accessible chair? Yes. Yep. We are working on that right now. So we have identified a unit that we're interested in purchasing. We have capital money for that in the budget already, within the pool's capital budget. So Robin has been working on that. And yes, we are expecting that will be replaced before the season starts.
Okay, fabulous. And obviously with the sad news of Oppie Creamy leaving that location, just curious what your plans are and if anything's already underway for finding a new vendor for that space.
Yeah, I should have asked Elaine to put that in the city updates. But yeah, we put an RFP out right before the holiday. Sorry, I'm in the holiday time warp a little bit, a couple weeks ago. But an RFP is out right now. We've already had 7 prospective vendors reach out with interest, which is great. Though we're doing a site visit Thursday up there for any prospective vendors. And then I believe it's February 14th is the due date for that. So we're soliciting interest. We've put a lot of pieces into the RFP around schedule, price points on the menu, really trying to make sure that we have some leverage to make sure that what comes in there is going to best serve the community and the pool.
Wonderful. Great. I really appreciate that. Good to know that that's out there and I can help cross promote it as well. So.
Yep. Yeah. And it's on the city's website under the bid section.
Thank you again. I'll leave it there.
Perfect. One thing too, this is more just me finding the numbers fascinating, but I did a quick analysis for season passes, what was the value of a a check-in basically for a season pass. And it ended up coming out to $6.04, which is almost exactly the same price as a day pass. So what that's telling me is that those are getting good use. You know, we're not losing a bunch of revenue on season passes versus day passes, and users are not getting, you know, shortchanged. So I think that was actually a really great number to see as well, that folks are maximizing that pretty effectively. So, all right, cool. I buttered these guys up a little bit already earlier, but I'm going to do it again quickly. The library team has been on fire. You know, fiscal year 24, which ended in June, was by far the busiest year in the library that I have experienced in my time here. Unfortunately, we've hit a little bit of a bump with, again, the indoor air quality pieces and the temporary relocation and some staff outages. So I think this year has been a little bit more of a holding on. But looking at the fiscal year 24 numbers, just really fabulous to see 500 new library cards, in-person visits up over 20%. And that's a jump from a previous year where we saw a pretty significant increase. Programming up a ton. And then circulation, both physical material and ebook materials up pretty significantly as well. So I can't say enough about how much life these guys squeeze out of 1,800 square feet. It's really remarkable, and it's just such a great, I think, sign that the decisions we're making around the O'Brien Center and the growth there are really responding to what we're hearing from the community, which is that this is an important resource that more and more people are accessing. So just wanted to, you know, take a moment to share these numbers because they were great, but also to give these guys some credit as well because they work really hard. I think too, I was going to mention too, so every year Nate and his team put together, with the Department of Libraries, they do a state report for all libraries across the state. And for the libraries of 5,000 or more per capita, you know, communities of 5,000 or more, we, perhaps unsurprisingly, tend to be on the lower end for resources in the way of space, staffing, but are punching way above our weight class as it relates to programming and are right in the middle as it relates to circulation. So I think that's telling me we're performing well given the resources that we have. And it's really, I'm thrilled to think about in 2 years, hopefully, talk to 2 years, when we have a new building open, what that's going to allow us to do and how those numbers are going to grow. So, all right, I'm going to keep moving unless I see a hand. So, and then a couple highlights from this year. You know, these presentations always are a little funny because you're kind of presenting across 3 fiscal years, but just a couple quick highlights from this year. Again, I mentioned the O'Brien Center, tons of work happening there with staff and the staff from CHT as we continue to move that project forward. We were proud to partner with Downtown Winooski on their Better Places grant, which led to some improvements in Rotary Park that are actually continuing into the spring, and that's really helping to enhance that as an event space for our community. I either drew the short straw or have the privilege of being elected to be the chair of the VRPA for the next 2 years, which is a pretty big honor, and I think for us as a community, pretty cool to have us at the helm. And then our Vermont Patriots soccer program won a pretty significant award from the Vermont Rec and Parks Association as well. So just a couple highlights I wanted to share before we get into the budget for this year. All right, and without further ado, here it is. So the roll-up budget here, which is what we typically present on, kind of categorizes all these high-level numbers. This is the budget for the entire department. So again, senior programs, Thrive, Rec, Library, Parks to a degree. There's a little bit of split with Public Works. But this is everything departmentally in one bucket. I think what you see here is that the staffing and benefit numbers are up and up a higher percent than the overall budget. But a few things I wanted to point out there. One is that we had 2 changes in health insurance. One, we had a staff member who had been opting out, who is now opting in. And then we have a vacancy in the Thrive position, which had been a single plan, and we budget when we have a vacancy for a family plan. So those 2 changes in health insurance were pretty big increase for us overall. So that definitely drives up that percentage a significant amount. And then as you'll see in a bit, as a department, our staffing and benefit percentage is really high. So any of those increases to health insurance, steps and grades for staff hit us at a pretty high percent. So there's not anything new. I think I just wanted to highlight that there's not new staff being added here. This is essentially business as usual, with really some costs that were not necessarily controllable costs. And then we did try to make some offsets here. You'll see some drops in supplies. We took a really hard look at our supply lines and looked back at some actuals over the last 5 years, which I typically do, and made some reductions there based on actuals, which we feel comfortable we can continue to operate. Again, part of that was we saw a huge increase with the ESSER funding, and I think there's a little bit of right sizing that's happening as we contract again. So again, feel comfortable with those reductions either way. So I'll pause here and see if there's any questions on these high level numbers. Yeah, Bryn.
I'm assuming the buildings is related to the OCC?
Correct. Yep. Thank you. I should have mentioned that. So yeah, this came in to the budget for current year, and it's a net neutral impact. As you may recall, that money used to be sitting in the 43 budget, which was the community center budget that is now zeroed out. And so we carried what had been the deficit on that building over as a placeholder for lease costs. So it's essentially a net negative or net neutral impact to the general fund budget, but our departmental budget grew by a little shy of 100,000 because of that shift, because the community center budget had lived in public works before.
Got it. Thanks for explaining.
Any other questions?
What's miscellaneous?
I believe, Angela can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that tends to be credit card fees. And we're seeing that grow as we see higher percentages of use for folks paying for things.
Absolutely correct.
What are our policies around credit card use?
Say more words.
Has the Finance Commission adopted a policy or drafted a policy for council to adopt relating to credit card use?
Bryn, just to clarify, do you mean credit cards used by the staff or for residents to pay for their?
Credit cards used by staff, which is.
So yeah, and I should clarify, this number is the fee that is being incurred by community members using their credit cards to pay for things. This is not credit card fees for us purchasing things on city credit cards.
Can you walk me through that a little bit more?
Ray, do you mind?
No, go, please.
So every credit card transaction that is processed by the city includes a convenience fee that is paid by the customer. We have to remit that fee to our third-party processor, and we code that fee into a specific expense line so we can track the revenue less the additional expense for people paying by credit card.
So this is passed through then?
It's essentially pass through. This goes directly to our third-party processor. That's GovPay through payments made on our website and Civic Rec for most of the recreation processes. It's usually around 3%, although GovPay does do dollar e-check fees and a minimum fee of $1.
Okay, all right. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
And to answer your other question, we do have a policy around credit card purchases that are made by the city. It is in the purchasing policy and the purchases procedures.
Yeah, for the very reason of that credit card fee and that pass-through of like, well, does the policy capture, like if there's a cheaper payment method, there's the convenience of paying with a credit card, then there's the fee. And I was curious more or less if the policy covered anything about if we're going to pay 3% on $10,000 versus paying less with a check, does the policy capture that?
Policy does capture that. Typically, we aren't seeing expenses that are like convenience fees tacked on for our purchases made via credit card. But we do sometimes see tax charged, and that's not something that we can get around. Usually, the credit cards that we have in the city are used for vendors that either don't offer invoicing options, or we use them so infrequently, it would be onerous to set them up as a vendor.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Can I ask a quick question?
Oh, yeah, go
too?
ahead.
Just about with some of the work that had to be done around the air quality in the library, is that primarily being covered by CHT or partnered with CHT?
Yes. Yeah, that, to my knowledge, has been covered by CHT to this point.
Right, it's being rolled into the cost of the project.
Yep.
All right, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to keep moving on, but stop me if you have questions. As I mentioned earlier, just wanted to highlight here, as a department, really high percentage of our expenses are salaries and benefits. So as you can see this pie chart, it's about 80% of our costs fall into those categories. So it's the people that are doing the work that we're investing in most heavily. And I think too, I was really struck by this number. This was in one of your very first council budget memos that came out, this little chart in the lower right. But the number of hours worked by department across the year, I think it's just worth noting how high, obviously police is high, but that's 24/7, 365 operation. And to see the number as high as it was for community services, I was really struck. So I think that also, is just a tie into the amount of salary and benefit percentage you see here. It's a lot of hours that are being paid for across the year. All right. I always like to make sure too, folks know this, but we work hard to ensure that we are bringing funds in to help offset costs. So you can see some of the funding support we brought in fiscal year 24 in the way of grants and donations, and then anticipate a little less than $310,000 worth of program revenue in the way of fees coming in as part of this fiscal year 26 budget. So I peeled the library out because libraries aren't really a revenue center. That's not really how they operate. And so it felt a little bit disingenuous to count that in the percentage. But for the pieces that are not the library, where there is a potential to generate revenue, about 27.5% of that cost is offset by program fees coming in. So again, trying to grow that number over time, I think, with an eye also though to making sure that programs and spaces are accessible to people. I think that really is a high priority for us, and that to a degree limits how much we can turn that knob. So wanted to include this information as well. Oh, I should mention too here, there's a grant, congressionally directed spending award for the O'Brien Center project as well that is not pictured here because it's going into, as Elaine was saying, into the broader project. But Elaine and I have both been pretty actively, and Nate as well, involved in helping to secure that. So that was, I think it's okay to say, $1 million grant towards that project. So that's not money that's going to come directly into us as an organization, but I think our community will benefit from that. So it's not captured here, but I think worth mention. All right. Quick breakdown of the department. So again, from Elaine's presentation, that smaller pie on the right shows community services is about 9% of the total city budget. Of that 9%, this larger pie is how that breaks down. So overall, I think a pretty good spread in terms of how we're investing across different service areas. I will say too, the senior center facility itself, the costs for the building are not captured in the community services budget. So that adds about 2% onto the senior center pie chunk to bring it up to about 6% when you bring in those building costs as well. But overall, I think pretty good to see that mix of how the money is spread around. And then just really quick high level here, what's included in this budget. I was sort of joking that I was going to put a slide that said nothing. Is really, as I mentioned, nothing new here. We are, I think, really trying to carry forward with the growth we saw last year on the heels of ESSER. Again, trying to sustain a lot of the great pieces we talked about, but as a budget, also really mindful that this was a year we were looking to invest in public safety and in capital, and so did not ask for new things this year overall. So within that sort of flat budget, a couple things that we really are holding as pretty high priorities for us over the next 18 months. Again, continuing to work with CHT on the O'Brien Center redevelopment. We are, fingers firmly crossed, aiming for late summer, early fall start date on that construction. We have a meeting later this week that I think will help put some clarity to that timeline, but continuing to move forward in good faith. Uh-oh. Can you guys see me still? Okay. Something fell off. I could see you on here and you can see me, so we're going to forge on. We are planning to do some trail design work at Gilbrook to help us get a sense of, for that really heavily utilized trail network, are there ways, what do we need to do? I think there's a lot of pieces and parts to that, and I think we'd like to develop a really comprehensive plan, because I also think there's a lot of parts of that we could manage in-house or with volunteers. So really trying to have a good game plan. So that would be coming out of the capital budget. Looking at continued expansion, or I should say re-expansion of the volunteers department, or volunteers in the department. We really saw that contract obviously during COVID, and it's been pretty slow to rebound, but I've had some really good recent success. So looking forward to that continuing to grow. And then again, mentioned the youth interventionist position. So I'm going to jump. Oh, and I should say too, Winooski Valley Park District was going to be here tonight, but they were triple booked with other communities. So they will be here next week. So I'm gonna tease here with this bullet point and go no further, and we'll talk more with them next week when they are here for the city council meeting. But Bryn, to your question earlier in terms of the youth interventionist position, again, this is a vacancy right now, and we've intentionally held off on rehiring because we wanted to think about what is the best way for us to be leveraging this resource and filling this need. I think this is a pretty similar slide to one you saw a few years ago, perhaps, but since the beginning of fiscal year 22, we have served about 46 different youth during that time through the youth interventionist position. Typical caseload open caseload at any given time is roughly 5 to 6 youth. And the range of interventions has really been broad. It's been everything from truancy issues, behavioral issues, housing instability issues, in some cases just needing, a mentoring relationship and someone to check in. So it's a little bit of a hard position to put a finger on exactly in terms of what it does. But I think, as you can see here, there's a lot of different ways that the position can be leveraged to help youth and families that are struggling in the community. And also it's been important for us to, especially early on as we sort of reestablish relationships with the Burlington CJC, some work with Spectrum Youth and Family early, and then obviously AALV in the Winooski Valley, or Winooski School District, who we work with very closely anyway. But yeah, and I think right now, Justin, Chief Huizinga, and I spoke back around Thanksgiving time and felt like with the new district liaison officer coming on board, wanting to give her some time to get her feet under her and be able to kind of engage her in thinking about this position moving forward. To be clear, this is not a law enforcement position. That's not what it was designed to be. However, there's also a lot of overlap between the folks that, the SRO, now DLO, are working with, and some of the kids that we are serving through this position. So I think we wanted to really make sure to have Saja's perspective on it as well from her role as a DLO. And so we have not yet been able to have that conversation. She's only been on the job a little over 2 months now. Is that right? Not even. Yeah, not even. So So at this point with this budget, we are, proposing that we hold the funds into the next fiscal year to allow us to rehire, but don't at this point necessarily have a definitive answer to the question of like, what is this position going to look like exactly? What's that? Oh, Thomas, go ahead.
Thank you. If the DLO were to feel that she had the capacity to take on, the responsibilities of this role, would the budgeted amount then go into the DLO officer's pay, or would that become eligible money to use for something else or put back into the general fund?
I'll answer, but then defer to Elaine and Angela to correct me. But my understanding is that the DLO position is fully funded in this proposed budget. So if the youth interventionist position remains vacant or we opt not to fill it, that funding would then be either savings or could be reinvested in something else.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah,
Her wages are her wages at this point.
Okay, that's great to know. Good for future thinking as we think about the many things that we have to spend money on. So
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Aurora.
Yeah, I think with this position really underlying that I personally, as counsel and thinking about representing Winooski's residents, wouldn't feel comfortable considering what the deputy mayor just spoke of potentially moving this fund into the police fund. So definitely feeling that's important here. I also feel like it's important to consider, just making sure there's transparency with the public, that the district liaison officer is not an SRO, which I feel like some of our communications or how it's been portrayed in the media hasn't necessarily been as clear on that. So just thinking about the way that we can gain like public input on this, more input from the school. Again, like this separate, but as you list here, the school is also a partnership. So I'm understanding that there's some consideration on how this should look. It's very important to me, and I think in considering this position and why this position is, that it is separate from law enforcement. But I'm also encouraged to see that we're holding that budget line because that feels very important, that we know this work is very important, listed all of the amazing things that previous interventionists have helped with. So holding that money and considering how best to serve our community does feel very important. So understand any changes in both certain job descriptions will come back to council. So I look forward to, if that's the direction it goes, for that to come back to us.
Yep. And Thomas, I see your hand again.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to correct any potential confusion. I wasn't advocating that this money would go back into the police department. If anything, my thought would be more about the senior center, but that's a conversation for later. But yeah, that's just why I wanted that clarification.
Yep. Christine.
I just wanted to say, I think it is smart to be reevaluating this role right now, given the vacancy. For folks who don't know, it was initially created for a specific person to keep them on staff. And given the shifts with the DLO role and positions that the school also added in conjunction with that change from the SRO, it does make sense to revisit how this support is structured. I also would give some food for thought for council. Because this is unclear, the timeline, the pathway, what the future service would look like, there is an option to not carry this in operating budget and to wait until there is a proposal and fund it with reserves and then turn it into an operating line in the future. Bryn, go ahead.
Thank you for the clarification, Mayor Lott. I think it's really helpful context to have that background. I know that there are a lot of really good support structures between the school and between our community services program that are focused on youth programming. I think we're doing a really great job on that. There's always opportunity to do more. Leveraging our partnerships, I think is really fantastic, and continuing to lean into that and explore new and different ways to share resources, to share program opportunities, I think is really exciting to me. I also want to just give a nod to what Thomas said about the senior center and seeing, like, given that there's vacancy savings right now, is there an opportunity to redirect some of those funds for the remainder of this fiscal year towards the senior center and offer some additional programming for the remainder of FY25? I know we're talking about FY26, but being that we have some vacancy savings right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I will say it's not one we've talked about internally from an operational perspective in terms of repositioning those vacant funds elsewhere. That's not, I guess, given that we're anticipating refilling in some way, shape, or form, we haven't really had that discussion, but happy to bring that up with Elaine and talk that over.
I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into it than I'm privy to, so just wanted to mention that as something else that I've been thinking about.
Yep. No, appreciate that. All right. Oop, I should say, are we good to move ahead? Okay. And as I teased earlier, we're transitioning into the very exciting finale of the community garden budget. So for folks who've been around here for a while, you may remember a lot of the community services budget used to exist outside the general fund in what were called special revenue funds. Thinking there was that those were going to be self-sustaining, which, spoiler alert, they were not in most cases. And so over time, we looked at bringing those into the general fund as a way to stabilize things and also just be more realistic about the revenue potential for programs in our community. Again, community of this size, of this demographic, the ability to crank up revenues to cover costs was not there. So you'll see here a bunch of budgets on the left that have existed at points in the past. Those are all kind of rolled together now in a community services program budget fund that we are tracking year over year. So this is funding that is really a little bit, I don't want to say a rainy day fund, but this is our savings account, so to speak, here. If we do have a unique opportunity, an unforeseen circumstance that comes up with a program that needs backstop, this is funding that we hold. So with that said, the one program that is continuing to operate as a special program budget is the community gardens. That's one that has been able to have revenue cover costs. It's about a $3,000 budget, and this one tends to go kind of boom bust. We will grow the revenue for a few years, make some investments in, say, raised beds or a new shed. The bottom line will drop, and then we'll grow back up again. So every year this budget carries a little bit of a surplus typically, and then again over time that surplus will grow to a point where we can make an investment in the gardens. So pretty straightforward here.
I have to say that boom bust is sort of like that would be a private sector kind of a spin on that. From our perspective, we don't want to be socking money away indefinitely. It should be in a
Right.
savings account for investments,
Right.
which is
Right.
what it's doing.
And then always like to end on just, things that we're looking out ahead to. So again, O'Brien Center redevelopment and temporary relocation of the library and the community services offices. That is very much front of mind for us as we look ahead to the next year. Continuing to keep an eye on the St. Stephen's lot and the senior center. We've had some initial conversations with the new owner there, but that's one we are definitely keeping an eye on. And then John mentioned this in his capital presentation, but the sheet pile wall at the Gilbrook Reservoir is going to be getting some analysis done this year. So that'll help us to kind of understand a little more deeply what needs to happen there to make either repairs or replacement happen in the future. And that's that. It is a complicated puzzle that we put together here, but like my friend here, we are pretty proud of what we put together and happy to present it to you tonight. So happy to take any other questions. Yeah, Bryn.
Can you refresh my memory on the Operation Bloom programming?
I will do my best. So they are generally running out of, in partnership with Public Works, but their budget sits in this community services bucket. They get donations in from community members and then will use those donations to purchase plantings and flowers for the, I'm not in Public Works, so I'm not going to remember the name. The spaces in between the roads.
Islands?
The medians. And
Medians,
the
thank you.
downtown flower beds.
Thank you. This is why you don't let me drive a plow truck. But yeah, so that's a pretty low, more or less money in, money out budget. And those funds coming in are donations from the community that then get reinvested.
Gotcha.
Yep.
I was curious about the Community Art Fund. I know that has some depleting funds in it.
Yep.
I'm curious, does that fall under the community services?
Not exactly. It sort of falls a little bit in between. Well, it had been CEDO and community services, but now that CEDO is not, kind of functioning as a staff person, it's a little bit in no man's land or no person's land. It's oh, Angela.
Budgetary authority for the Public Art Fund lies with the city manager. It is not a budgeted fund, so there is no revenue source and there is no planned expenditure on a year-to-year basis. It would come to the city council for use of reserves.
Yeah. And one thing, Bryn, I would just say too, is one item on my work plan, which has not gotten off the bottom of the list yet, but we have looked at some draft public art policy language from other communities that would help kind of guide us in the ways that we're spending that funding. Because I think right now what we're struggling with is there's no policy guidance to say, what are we investing in? How are we making those decisions? And so that is definitely something that's on the radar for us looking forward. I'm not going to say it's going to happen next week, but it is something that we know would really be helpful as we think about how we invest those funds.
Yeah, and I think as, Safe, Healthy, and Connected continue to look at their charge and opportunities for impact, I think community art is an area that could be enhanced. Having a policy, looking at what other communities have in place would be helpful to at least help guide what funds we do have.
Yep.
And hopefully identify opportunities for continuing to replenish that. I visit other communities locally and then, out of state and have envy about their public art, and would love for us to have a little bit more structure around that here so that we can bring those opportunities to Winooski.
I will say that given that there's no staff support for that, well, that's partly why it hasn't come up the bottom of the list. Something that a future possible CEDO could help with, though, I would think.
I like the plug there, Arlene.
All right.
Well, Ray, thank you so much for the presentation. There's a lot of really good data in there. I feel like it's very affirming of all of the investments that have happened over the last several years across your department, and great work from you and your team.
Thank you.
I would open it up if there's anyone in chambers who wishes to ask questions. Any public comment?
Judy already asked hers earlier.
She got a one-to-one. Anyone attending via Zoom, if you want to ask a question or make a comment related to the community services presentation, you can use raise hand or chat. All right, and before we close it out, were there any other council questions that you saved for the end? Ray, I also want to say your presentation walkthrough preemptively answered mine, so
Oh, good.
thank you.
Good. All right. Excellent.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. We will move on to item C, on for discussion, the strategic vision area goal update on housing, and welcome Jasmine.
To my personal effects, Need a bag.
Okay. Good evening. So I'm here to do the third, the second? The third goal update for this fiscal year. It is very similar to the last update I gave maybe 2 months ago. So I'm not going to go terribly into detail with every single item, but I'm happy to answer specific questions. I will go through the must-dos and the recommended. So
Sorry, it's the second one.
it's the second one. For the must-dos, for educating tenants and property owners of changes to the public building registry, similarly to the last update, the code enforcement department is not fully staffed, obviously with Bruce leaving, so that is hindering any capacity for additional public outreach or educational efforts. So hopefully that will be filled in a short amount of time. We will see, because we'd love to get started on those efforts, but for now, proceeding slower than planned. For continuing ordinance updates and ULDUR changes, as mentioned before, earlier in this meeting, the Planning and Housing Commissions have now met 4 times in total. The most recent one was in November, when we held a developer roundtable to gather input from private, public, and nonprofit developing partners. The meeting was very successful and brought forth valuable information to consider as the 2 groups continue to work on inclusionary zoning and replacement regulations. And staff are currently working on scheduling a building pro forma presentation from a local developer to highlight current development costs and barriers to housing. That will likely be on the 22nd, as mentioned. For under recommended, the equitable housing needs assessment is now moving faster than it was in the last update, so that's a nice update that we had the contract signed. So UVM's Center for Rural Studies are now working on the first phase of the project, which is a comprehensive review of existing literature and data. And so they have begun reviewing, I think, about 30 different documents and reports and memos and meeting minutes and all that kind of good thing, in order to start generating a report that will include data and then relevant literature as well. So we should be having that within the next couple of months, and that information will of course be shared with the Housing Planning, Inclusion and Belonging Commission, and then City Council as well. And once that has been completed, we will begin looking at phase 2 of the project, which will include the local bidder as well, and looking at designing our broader community engagement strategy and the collection of new data. So it'll be great to look at the first phase and see what data we have and what holes we have in order to guide phase 2 of the project. No update on the implement plans review process. And then for the airport noise mitigation program, there was a public meeting on October 23rd and 24th to provide an overview of the draft noise exposure map. And then in the last airport commission meeting in November, they reviewed that map, and 52 additional homes were identified as eligible for the program, but these were all in South Burlington. So the mayor recently sent a request to the program to include Winooski residences in the program for any new grant dollars. feel free to speak to that if you would like, Christine. And then operational updates follow that. I won't go into those because I had quite a long update last time, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you all may have.
Thanks, Jasmine. Council have any questions on this update? Aurora?
I have one, and this is to the short-term rental registry. Just wanted a reminder of kind of when that comes back to council and we consider doing a cap.
Yes. So I believe what's written into the ordinance will be July 1st. So I will prepare that and bring that to council probably a little bit before, like early summer maybe. And I'll provide, more of a comprehensive, I can do like a data presentation, just so that you all feel like you have enough information to guide whatever number you would like to set a cap at, if you do want to set a cap. But probably May or June. I know we have it in the planner.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, because I just want to make sure, right, that
Yeah, we don't miss
we
that.
have the time to do that work, but also that it then gets communicated out.
Yes, I know. A year is going by quickly.
Yeah.
Corinne?
See if my internet cooperates with me. I was wondering if the presentation on the 22nd will also include content from a nonprofit housing developer, housing body.
No, what is planned so far is for a private developer pro forma, but we can certainly ask a nonprofit developer. It would probably be CHT. If they would have something, I'm not sure if they have the capacity or interest in. I know that the one that will be presented is like a tool that has been shared at other housing commissions and has been created in a way for educational purposes. I'm not sure, I can't say if a nonprofit has the resources to expend on creating a tool like that, but that's a good point. I can definitely ask and see, because I know that it's a very different funding formula, because the nonprofit generally will utilize public subsidy. So depending on what that is, it has a large impact on the funding.
Or if that's not feasible, curious if you've explored opportunity from like VHFA or another organization that might be able to speak to that from a different perspective as well.
I can reach out, but no, this developer is specifically building something like currently in Winooski, so that is helpful since that has not been the case for a couple of years. And they have presented at a few other planning commissions or housing and planning commissions within the county. So that's why it came up, and it was offered at the developer roundtable. So I think that's where it came up initially. I'm not sure if VHFA has any sort of similar. I know that there's like a generic online website that you can play with numbers for pro formas. It's a really nice website, but it's not Vermont specific, nor community specific. But I can ask Leslie from VHFA and see if they have any suggestions.
Okay, thanks.
If I could ask Jasmine, I think to Britt's question, I think the purpose of that pro forma discussion is to see the private costs to develop in the context of making decisions around actual numbers in inclusionary zoning, replacement, and incentives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm not sure if a nonprofit's pro forma serves that goal when they would be able to create that type of housing without the incentives that are in the discussion.
Yeah,
so I don't
that's
think
a good
it's
point.
I don't think it's like we don't. It could be useful to see it, but it doesn't feel like it's a requirement to move the discussion forward. if they're unable to provide it.
I see. Yeah, I think I was just looking for a diverse opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, I will put in that I had some similar concerns that this could be extremely biased. I just feel like we should, I don't know how best to put this, but ensuring that certain voices aren't being or using their power to be louder in these conversations in a way that's unequitable. And while I can see the value in having this presentation, again, I do feel like knowing, given the developer's history and current interactions with the city, that I have concerns with, like I said, kind of going off of Britain, that this is potentially a biased opinion and opens some potential for someone to have more input than is necessarily equitable to other folks.
Yeah, I think part of the difficulty is that there's a very small pool of people who have developed in Winooski, period, and even smaller pool of people who have developed in Winooski in the last 5 years, and an incredibly small group of developers who are developing currently with the current conditions and market and costs that developers are dealing with right now. I think this stemmed off as a request from the Planning and Housing Commissions, from the Developer Roundtable, since I think that there was a feeling that they potentially don't understand the true cost of development and how kind of small things can impact that. And I think it was in an effort to kind of seek out additional information to help guide the decisions surrounding inclusionary. It would be great if every developer had something like this available, but I think it has been something that, took a lot of time for an educational lens. I definitely understand your concerns about equity. I think the issue is that the pool is so small and that the likelihood of other people spending the time and effort into creating a tool that would be educational in a productive way is low. But it doesn't mean I can't ask.
Yeah. So maybe depending on this outcome, just asking council as a whole to kind of keep that perspective in mind of kind of who's having access to us.
Any questions from members of the public on this housing update?
Not in the room.
I'll remind you, you can use chat or raise hand if you're on Zoom. Oh, we do have a question here in Zoom. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Great. I'm just kind of learning about this, but I just wanted to, the last point you were all talking about as far as having developers have a conversation and or develop a tool, and the request of making sure that the council is thinking about some of the concerns around access and equity. And I almost wonder if it's possible to identify what that would look like before inviting people to the table to ensure that that remains a priority.
It is good food for thought, Jen. I think for this where we are in this process, like we already hosted a meeting with area developers, both private and nonprofit, to get input. And then our commissioners requested more data on the development costs, which is what's stemming this specific presentation that's coming up. But I certainly can elevate this in the joint meeting of the commissions when they receive this information, to keep that in mind, how many voices they're hearing from. and if there are specific follow-ups, or like having them consider specific additional data points or perspectives that they would like to hear.
Thank you. I just thinking about what has happened in Burlington in the last decade and other parts of the country when that hasn't been considered is creating some pretty big issues that we're living through right now. So I just feel like feels like it should be a priority in general. And I appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thanks, Jen. Were there any other questions from council? Oh, go ahead, Aurora.
I was going to say too, Jen is one of our IMB commissioners, so thinking this might be something to make sure is on a future agenda and checking in with our ambassadors who are on both the Planning and Housing Commission to make sure they have the support that they need. So putting that as well as thoughts for that commission.
Okay. Sorry, you could probably hear me type. I was making a note to follow up on this in the commission meeting. Seeing no additional questions or comments, we can move on from this discussion item. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you.
And move on to our last item, D, the on for discussion approval of the city manager review process. So we've all been here before. Every year around this time, we kick off an annual evaluation process for the city manager. In this memo, have outlined, I'm recommending we use the same tool we've been using that we made updates on last year. I've included links to the last two evaluation summaries for reference, and have proposed a timeline here, which Councilor Judge has graciously agreed to support us with. So the goal would be to distribute this survey to council and leadership team tomorrow, with 9 days to submit responses, and then another week there for Charlie to compile those and then share out with us. And then we would have our executive session discussion of the results with Elaine at our February 3rd meeting. And then ideally, I put here February 18th, it's a less firm deadline, but be able to put the summary out for the public record. So asking for approval of this process so we can kick it off, but open to any questions, suggestions.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion from Charlie to approve with a second from Aurora. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. We will kick this process off then. That's the end of tonight's agenda. We are at the end of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Bryn?
Second.
Second by Charlie. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries and meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Hope we're all nice and warm at home.
Thank you.
Hope you get home.